All right, everyone, now we've got funny news today, which is I'm corroborated in believing that Kamala Harris will not become the Democratic nominee and will never be the President of the United States. Now, beyond people that are simply, they don't know anything about her really, so they haven't looked into her very, very dubious past, maybe, and so they think of her as just, generically a liberal Democrat. They're like, yay, she doesn't like Trump, so, we love her because they're never Trumpers or whatever, most of which are Republicans at this point. Kamala Harris has come out and literally endorsed, in her own words, literally, I'm not talking figuratively, literally now endorsing identity politics. It's like, well, the people are being racist and sexist for decrying the use of identity politics. We will stand for all of these wonderful social issues, and she rattles them off like, gender equality, which we already have, equality for gay people, which we already have, and by the way, they're alienated by feminists constantly now. Equality of the races and stuff. It's like, where's the racial disparity? The only thing that comes close to that is affirmative action, and we all know who that's aimed against. Namely, people like Sarah Jeong, actually. No, there's no problem with these things, and identity politics are a losing proposition. To come out and completely endorse it, Kamala Harris, I don't think wants to be the president. A lot of people think she's going to run. I don't. I think it's Gillibrand that has, really, she's like sitting there gritting her teeth waiting. Kamala Harris less so. I think what she wants is to be a firebrand of the left and have a permanent position in the legislature. And that's a really great way to do it. Look, the young upstart Democratic generation, there are less leftists in Gen Z than there were certainly among millennials, but they are further left. The ones that are liberal are more liberal than the millennials, if you can possibly imagine that as a realistic situation. By and large, they're more conservative as a generation than anything since the early 1900s, certainly before the boomer era. But those that are on the left are very fiery leftists. Kamala Harris wants to be one of the people that represents sort of that concept, that group of people. She doesn't have to worry about appeasing. If you're not running for the presidency, if you're just running in one voting district, which tends to be either to the left or to the right, you're going to tend to get people running for that position, and at least those that win, who are more out there. They are more conservative. They are more liberal. As opposed to someone, if they're in a swing region or if they're running on a federal level, they need to moderate what they say. Traditionally, presidents have done this. Presidential candidates will, at first during the primaries, they'll be like out there, they're trying to outflank people. Trump did this. He tried to simply be the most fringe but still pragmatic candidate that he could be, and it worked. He didn't really, though, moderate himself once he got to the general. A lot of people thought that would lose him the election. I guess that they were wrong. In the modern era, it's not necessarily necessary. I just find not necessarily necessary to do so long as your opponent has a shitty message. If you can outmaneuver around them 4D chess style, it doesn't really matter, especially if it's someone like boring Hillary. With Kamala Harris, she's never going to become the president of the United States. No, not after this, certainly. Because this will turn off all the neoliberals, but she doesn't care about the neolibs. She only needs a small minority of neoliberals to back her in order to win an election for the legislature. No, she wants to be further left. She wants to make sure that some progressive doesn't come along and steal her position. That's what she ultimately wants. We see this all the time. It's like Feinstein, embattled as she is right now, with both the Chinese spy driver and not getting the endorsement of her own state's DNC. She is embattled and endangered in her position, not seriously, but could be in the future, because the person opposing her is further left. She's been, and think, on guns and stuff like that, she's as far left as they get. She is a total she's a total cultural Marxist, I would say. I think she's far left on other counts too, but for California standards, she's center left. For their standards, she's pretty normal, which shows how far California has fallen since the days of the gold rush or something like that. But De Leon is further left on certain social issues, more inclined to take them up as a so-called progressive banner. In so doing, Kamala Harris, doing the same thing, is positioning herself to be a main power within the legislature more than to run for a federal election. No, you don't want to just whip up the far left and younger voters into a frenzy. They're the ones that'll knock on the door and pass out billets for you, but they're not the ones that'll show up at the ballot box. That's the blue dogs you need. But the problem for the Democrats is right now a lot of those business class and working class sort of middle America, small town Democrats that they could rely on in the Rust Belt and elsewhere, some several million people, union Democrats especially where they're prevalent, they all left for the Republicans, and they still are. Because of the jobs reports and the economy going well, even more of them are leaving the Democratic Party. For every younger liberal individual who's filling their ranks up and voting at low levels, you're going to get several people that leave the Democratic Party and vote at very high levels who are, 30 to 50 somethings essentially and in some labor union. They're all leaving the Democratic Party. The union bosses are like, please back Hillary. Why aren't I 50 points ahead? Well, yeah, it's because I'm Hillary Clinton. The labor union bosses all endorsed the Democrats. Now, the unionists themselves seem to lean towards Donald Trump. I think it's going to be even more come 2020. Kamala Harris will not be the one running against him. If I had to guess, say that you had 100 points to allocate to different people, as far as how likely you thought it was that they would be, at least in the end running, the top 3 or so candidates that would probably be running against Trump. Like let's choose the top 3. Gillibrand's on that list. I hate to say it, but Joe Biden's on that list, assuming he's still alive by that point. Not because he can win. He couldn't win against Trump. Absolutely not. Not because he's qualified, not because he's a good candidate, but because he's got enough name recognition and apparently a lot of Democrats like him. Well, that'd definitely give him he'd be the front runner today. If the race were starting today, the Democratic primaries, and they were all in, Joe Biden would be number 1. Now, again, not because he's the most viable, he's not the most skilled, not the most well-spoken, he's not even the corporate darling at this point, but because roughly a third of all Democrats think that he should be the one going up against Trump, that he's their favorite. And then Gillibrand. And I'd say, probably McAuliffe, based on his wedge issue. Again, because of the far left embracing him. He's a neoliberal, but he's certainly got the ear of some of the further left, too, because of Charlottesville. Essentially, that's what it boils down to. McAuliffe would be up in... Now, again, I don't think he could win. I wouldn't vote for him. I don't think he's qualified at all. Gillibrand's the only one out of them that's sane, and she's sane because she's a corporate Democrat. In other words, she's more centrist than Hillary Clinton, but she's willing to pretend for all the progressives. That's what she's doing. She's maneuvering herself. She's the smart Democrat right now. She also happens to be on the younger side and look decent for the cameras. She would be a front runner. Absolutely. I think she'll run. Kamala Harris, I don't think so. If she did, it'd be a joke candidacy. She wouldn't get the nomination. No, because the Democratic Party has a schism right now, but there aren't enough far leftist Gen Z voters and younger side millennials to overwhelm all of the older voters who lean towards corporate and union liberalism. They're the ones ultimately that control the money. They're the ones that run the DNC. We saw what happened the last time around. Bernie Sanders had roughly 40% of the Democratic Party behind him. That's nothing to shake a stick at, but he got shafted. He got screwed. Chocolate style. He got screwed by the DNC itself. They took sides, they decided beforehand and coronated a candidate. That's why I never took Bernie Sanders seriously, regardless of him winning states. I'm like, yeah, there's a chance in hell he becomes the nominee. Ultimately, it boils down to who does the DNC want? Who does Donna Brazile want, essentially? Who does Nancy Pelosi? Who does Chuck Schumer want? And who do the Clintons want? Well, yeah, I wonder, do the Clintons want a Clinton or this other dude who they don't even think is viable? I wonder who's going to get the nomination. That's the way the Democrats work. The Republicans, after Ron Paul visibly and very publicly changed their rules to prevent outside candidates from happening. It didn't work for Trump, but they did that. But at least they were open about the fact that they were being corrupt, which is why they lost 2012. Because some millions of young voters that would have backed them if they hadn't mistreated Ron Paul said, fuck Mitt Romney. That's why you lost. Republicans learned that the hard way. The Democrats, though, didn't do it visibly. They did it behind the scenes, and they're still doing it now. They very quietly changed their rules to try to prevent someone like Bernie Sanders from even running in their race. Yes, I'm sure that this will do very, very well with younger voters who really lean further left. I'm sure they'll vote for whatever generic neoliberal you decide to coronate. That's why they're grooming Gillibrand to run. That's about all. Peace out.